What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Week 10 wide receiver trade targets. We're doing the same thing as always. I'll go over wide receiver, buy low, sell high in this one, running backs tomorrow. We're using the same logic that we always use. Find players that are extremely involved in their offense, but have been getting unlucky with touchdowns. So we'll start by looking at the leaders in air yards over the last month and seeing if there are any differences in fantasy production. And there is. Keenan Allen remains the biggest buy low at the wide receiver position. He ranks 6th in air yards over the last month, despite playing limited snaps in one of the weeks, and yet he ranks 41st in fantasy points since he hasn't scored. He started the season off with 8 for 123 and a touchdown, 8 for 98, and then 13 for 182 and 2 touchdowns. In the 6 weeks after that, he's failed to go over 61 receiving yards. He has over 5 receptions just once, and he hasn't scored. But this is a guy who we all know is an elite talent, is getting a ton of air yards. He just hasn't been able to find the end zone. And you might say that's because of Hunter Henry and Mike Williams. They're big red zone threats, right? So it makes sense that Keenan Allen hasn't scored. But Mike Williams has 0 touchdowns on the season, and Hunter Henry has 2 in week 6, but then none in any other game. The problem has more been Gordon and Eckler. They have 12 combined touchdowns on 25 green zone touches and targets, whereas Mike Williams and Keenan Allen have 2 total touchdowns combined on their 11 green zone looks. But the Chargers have come out and said they want to throw the ball more often when they get close, at least more than they have been. And these guys aren't going to go scoreless for the entire season. So if you're looking for a wide receiver 1, then I'd be looking at Keenan Allen. Mike Williams would also be a target, but he had a pretty good game this week, and I wouldn't really call him a buy low, but I wouldn't be unhappy if he were involved in a trade. So I'm not going out and trying to get Mike Williams everywhere because he's a huge buy low, but I think he's a really nice asset if you want to involve him in a trade. Another guy I'd look at is Alshon Jeffery. Haven't talked about him in a long time, but he has 10 total receptions over the last 3 weeks, going over 38 yards just once, and he hasn't scored in that stretch, and he's going in to his bye week. So he might be really cheap if his owner needs a win right now, which is a situation a lot of people are going to find themselves in this week. The Eagles face the 3rd easiest rest of season pass defense schedule, which might move up to the easiest after they face the Patriots. But here's what I would do when trading for Alshon. Number 1, I'd make sure you don't need him over the next 2 weeks, right? You're not trading for Alshon if you're in win now mode or you really need a wide receiver because guys are going on bye. Well, Alshon's not going to help you with that because he's also going on bye, and then he faces the Patriots. So you've got to make sure you do not need him or the person you're trading away or the players you're trading away in the next 2 weeks. I'd also make sure you leave a note in the trade. Sometimes people look at trades without really looking at schedule or what people have done recently. So his owner might just reject the trade without knowing that he's going on bye and that has a tough matchup. And especially if your opponent needs a win now, I'd remind them of that. Leave a note saying, hey, you got to win now. You don't have him this week. You probably can't use him next week. You need players who are going to help you win right now, and I can provide you with those players. But just sending a trade without reminding them of that has a much lower chance of getting done. Because if you can get this deal done, then he faces Seattle, Miami, the Giants, Washington, and Dallas to end the season. Dallas is a tough matchup, but the rest of those are really easy. So you'll have a really solid piece for a month, and I wouldn't be shocked if his owner doesn't ask for a whole lot. Also looking ahead, it's important to target players with dream matchups in the playoffs. Obviously, you still need to get there, and you still need to win the first week of the playoffs to even make semifinals and finals. But like I said last week, if I make the playoffs, I want it to be with a team I know has a great shot at winning. So I'd rather try and trade for players who will be going off in those most important weeks instead of keeping a team that's good and that will probably get there, but that I don't really think is going to win, or at least I don't think has a good chance of winning? Well, the best possible matchup for a wide receiver, in my opinion, is the Bucs. They're not the worst pass defense or anything. There are plenty of teams that have a worse pass defense than them, but they're not good. Like, they're still very below average, and their run defense is so elite that teams skew pass heavy against them, even if they normally skew run heavy. And their offense is so explosive that it leads to a ton of shootouts. So who do they play in weeks 15 and 16, the semifinals and finals, or just the finals if you have a 2-week playoff? The Lions and the Texans, who also have explosive offenses. The Lions game in particular could see a total north of 56, but I expect both of those games to have a total over 50. And we all know, especially in that Lions game, unless the Lions sign a free agent and really try and run the ball late in the season, which I don't expect to really happen, maybe they sign someone, but not to run the ball a lot. I mean, that game is going to feature a ton of passing. So even though they're going to cost a lot, we're trying to win, right? So why not target an elite wide receiver who is all but guaranteed to go off in one of the 2 most important weeks? So Kenny Golladay and DeAndre Hopkins aren't buy lows by any means. They've been great, but they're wide receiver 1s, and they have the best chance of helping you in the final 2 weeks. I also want to point out that Will Fuller will probably be back in week 16. I can't know exactly how many weeks he's going to be out with this injury, but he'll probably be back in week 16. And it's entirely possible that he was dropped in your league. So he could be a league winner in that matchup, championship weekend, and he might be free. The last name I'll bring up is Odell. He's the wide receiver 26 on the season, despite already going on bye and having just 6% of his fantasy points come off touchdowns, which is bottom 5 in the league. The Browns started the season with one of the most difficult schedules in the league, but they end with one of the easiest. And I can guarantee you his owner is upset that they drafted him and is more than willing to do a trade for a new player. And I don't need to remind you the sort of upside that he brings to the table. How about some players to sell high on? I usually like to see which players have the highest percent of their fantasy points come from touchdowns, since those are the most random part of football. Selling high on players who are getting lucky is always smart to do. Unfortunately, the names I usually bring up are still the ones at the top. It's Thielen, T.Y., and Williams, but 2 of them are hurt, and then Tyrell Williams is coming off a bad game, so you probably missed the boat on those players. And then there aren't that many players that are close to them that really stand out. The next thing I do is I'll look at playoff schedule. Are there teams we should be avoiding because they play the best pass defenses? But nothing really stands out there. I mean, the Rams face the 49ers in week 16, but I don't think you're going to get good enough value on Robert Woods to be worth trading him, and I'd have to get an insane amount to trade away Cooper Kupp. So we're really just left with who's overperforming right now, and the only 2 names I could come up with this week are Julian Edelman and DK Metcalf, and then I ran the wide receiver model, and it identified both of those 2 players as well as people who are at the peak of their value. I want to make sure that everyone knows these aren't players you're just giving away because they're bad or because they're going to do bad. That's not the case. It just means that these guys are probably at the highest point of their value on the season. So we'll start off with Edelman. And he's been amazing. 49 targets over the last 4 weeks. He's the wide receiver 9 on the season. And the Patriots' schedule gets tougher, which is actually a good thing for Edelman. They might have to skew a little bit more pass heavy. They might have to throw a little bit later in games, although it also means the touchdown upside will be capped a little bit more than it has been, since they're not going to be scoring 40 every week. The issue with him is that the targets are likely to dip a little bit. We saw Sanu play every snap last week and have 14 targets, but then James White only had 3 targets. So if we can expect Sanu to have a really nice target share, which I do expect to happen, James White to go back to his normal share, and then we have N'Keal Harry likely returning after the bye. Maybe it's not the first week after, but he's likely coming back later in the season. That's going to hurt the target share. It's going to hurt his touchdown upside, talking about Julian Edelman there. And let's not forget, N'Keal Harry was a lot of teams' top wide receiver in the draft class. So he's not going to come back and get like one target a game. He should have a few targets every single week at a minimum. So it's more likely that Edelman is around that 6 or 7 reception range than the 8+ receptions he's been posting. So he'll still be good, but he probably won't be as good as he's been. So this might be the peak time to trade him if you're looking to do so. And then we have DK Metcalf. He's scored 3 touchdowns on his last 9 receptions. Definitely on the upper range of what you should expect. He posted a monster stat line this week, but that was in a dream matchup. And the week before, he had the 2 touchdowns on 3 total receptions. I'm sure you can flip him for someone that has a more stable role in their offense. And it's not often that you get a wide receiver facing the Falcons and then the Bucks in back-to-back weeks. So his production is definitely going to spike in those matchups because you can't really ask for 2 better matchups. And then he plays the 49ers next week. So this is a pretty easy case where we can say 2 great matchups, 2 great performances. That's probably the peak of his value. Plays the 49ers next. Probably a good time to trade him away if someone is looking for him. So those are the top wide receiver trade targets for week 10. Remember, I can't go over every name in the buy low model. So if you want to see the complete list, look at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. I'll go over running backs tomorrow, then start sits on Friday. So be on the lookout for both of those videos. But that's the end of this one. I hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button? And if you're new here, how about subscribing to the channel? But thanks for watching.